Hi there, freelance friends. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me again. Today is part 2 of a topic that we started a couple of podcasts ago. If you missed the original episode on working on your presence in virtual meetings as a freelancer, I will put the link in the comments for you so that you can check that out. And then, of course, you can then come back and enjoy this part 2. Because there is something that nobody tells you when you start freelancing, and it's that your technical skills are really only half of the battle. You can be brilliant at what you do, whether that's writing code, designing graphics, managing projects, or crafting copy. But if you can't show up well in a virtual meeting, you're leaving money and opportunities on your freelancing table. In today's remote-first world, most of your client interactions happen through a screen. And that means your ability to project confidence, engagement, and professionalism on camera directly impacts whether clients trust you, enjoy working with you, and ultimately want to hire you again. Now, I have seen incredibly talented freelancers struggle to get repeat business because they came across as disengaged or unprofessional in meetings. And then I've seen less experienced freelancers thrive because they mastered the art of virtual presence. Well, I have good news. Virtual presence is a learnable skill. It's not about being naturally charismatic or extroverted. It's about understanding how communications work through a camera and then making intentional choices about how you show up there. So let's break down exactly how you do that. First, you're going to want to be very aware of eye contact. And this is tricky in virtual meetings because your natural inclination is to look at people's faces on your screen, right? But I want you to try to train yourself to look at your camera lens when you're speaking, especially during important points. When you're listening, you can look at the screen, but when you respond, shift to the camera, because this creates the impression of direct eye contact and engagement. It takes practice. I'm still working on it myself. And I'm not going to lie, it's tricky sometimes. But the practice is worth it. Now, one little trick that I've used is to place your video conferencing window as close to your camera as possible to minimize the distance between where you're looking and where the camera sits. And then, of course, if you're using your laptop, you have to consider the proximity between you and your laptop, depending on the camera in that laptop itself. My other laptop, I find that I really have to consciously push it away from me because otherwise it really makes my face large and you can't even see my, shoulders sometimes because of it. Now, here's another thing that surprises people about your online presence. Energy translates differently on camera than it does in person. So what feels like a normal energy when you're in person can often read as low energy on video. So you need to be conscious of upping your game and bringing slightly more enthusiasm, clearer gestures, and more vocal variety than you would to a face-to-face meeting. Think about news anchors and TED Talk speakers and how they effectively do that. Now, they're not being fake. They're compensating for the flattening effect of video. You want to be sure to sit up straight, maybe lean slightly forward to show engagement, and you can use hand gestures within the frame to emphasize points. I try to refrain from doing that during these podcasts, but when I'm training, my hands are moving. Avoid slumping, crossing your arms, or fidgeting with off-screen objects. Now, this next one sounds a little strange. It's to manage your face. But video does make your facial expressions hyper visible. I've noticed that doing these podcasts. Sometimes when I'm editing them, I think, what is that face that I just made? Do I really make those on a regular basis? And I guess the answer is yes. But you want to be aware of your resting face and what it communicates. If you naturally look stern or bored when you're concentrating, clients might interpret that as disinterest or maybe even disagreement with what they're saying. So practice active listening expressions. You can nod, you can smile slightly. Some people are very good at raising their eyebrows to show interest. And remember, when someone else is speaking, you're still on camera. So if you're checking your phone, looking off screen, or letting your face go blank, that will send a message about how you value or don't value the conversation. Also, be sure to eliminate distractions. You want to close unnecessary browser tabs and applications. Put your phone on silent and flip it face down out of reach. Close the door to your office if you have one. And if you live with others, make sure you communicate your meeting schedule and ask not to be interrupted. I know that that's something that I have to remind people in my household about if they are home when I happen to be on a call. Because every single time you glance away from the screen to check a notification or respond to something in your physical environment, you're signaling to your clients that they don't have your full attention. Now, you also want to participate strategically. Freelancers sometimes fall into this trap of being too passive in meetings, especially in larger group meetings where they feel like an outsider. But remember, the client hires you because of your expertise. So you want to showcase that expertise. Speak up, provide your insight, ask clarifying questions so that they know that you're tracking with what they're saying. Don't be afraid to contribute ideas. Now, at the same time, be strategic about when you chime in. Make sure you're adding value rather than just filling airtime. Remember, the goal is to be remembered as an engaged and valuable contributor, not dominant or long-winded. Next, you want to dress for the camera, not your couch. Now, you don't need a full suit for every call, but you should be dressed as you would be for an in-person meeting with that same client. Obviously, the top half of your attire matters the most, but you want to avoid the temptation to wear pajama bottoms, in my opinion. And the reason that I say this is because you may need to stand up unexpectedly. I know that I have. And then, of course, people can see what you are wearing on your bottom half. So preferably not pajamas. Now, the experts say that solid colors work better on camera than busy patterns. I like patterns and I do wear them on occasion, but it is something that you can keep in mind. They also advise you to avoid bright whites that can sometimes blow out on camera depending on the lighting. They also say the same thing with black. If you have poor lighting, that could make you disappear. I wouldn't say totally avoid it. Use your judgment, but it's just something to keep in mind. And then blues, greens, and earth tones tend to be the most flattering. Next, you want to master the mute button. Muting yourself when you're not speaking, when you're in a larger meeting, is important because background noise that you don't even notice, like a furnace kicking on or traffic in the distance, people out in the yard doing work for you, can be incredibly disruptive to others. But on the other hand, don't stay on mute during small meetings or one-on-one conversations, because then it creates awkward delays in your response and makes the conversation feel very unnatural. Now, the transactional nature of freelancing can make relationships feel purely professional, but connection matters. This is why clients hire people that they do. They hire people who they like and trust. So be sure to set a good impression. Arrive early and use that pre-meeting time to ground yourself. If you join a few minutes early, you'll also get a chance to have an informal conversation as others trickle in. Basically, that's the virtual equivalent of a hallway chat. You can ask someone how their week's going. You can comment on something from a previous conversation, make a genuine observation. These micro moments of connection will add up over time. Also, remember personal details as best as you can. Take notes about the client's interests or challenges or personal details that they share with you. It makes me think of that classic book of how to win friends and influence people by Dale Carnegie, where he talks about how people like, by nature, we all like people to have an interest in us. So adding in a reference naturally in future conversations can have an impact. For instance, if a client mentioned that their kid's soccer tournament was last week, you could ask how it went. This level of attention signals that you see them as people, not just paychecks. Also, of course, you want to read the room. Pay attention to conversational cues in meeting dynamics. If you're in a large meeting and people seem rushed, keep your contributions concise. If a client seems stressed, acknowledge it and ask how you can help. Virtual meetings make it harder to pick up on subtle cues, but they are noticeable if you actively watch for them. Last, you want to follow up thoughtfully. After important meetings, send a brief recap email. Summarize key decisions, action items, and next steps. This will help to demonstrate that you are paying attention. It also helps to prevent miscommunication. And, of course, it creates a paper trail that protects both you and the client. Now, just like any skill, virtual presence improves with deliberate practice. Record your meetings when it's appropriate, and then take the time to review them and give yourself honest feedback. Is there anything you would change? What worked really well? You can also ask trusted colleagues for feedback. Consider it like doing a mock presentation with a friend who can critique your present. Also pay attention to professionals who really do well in virtual meetings. They just seem to have a presence. Watch how skilled presenters manage their energy on camera, how they use pauses, and how they frame themselves. Notice what makes you trust and like certain speakers in virtual settings, and try to adapt your techniques to that style. Of course, you're going to make it your own, and you should make it your own, but you can use it as sort of a template of sorts. Now, I hope you realize that improving your virtual presence isn't about vanity. It's about investing in your freelance business. So think about what it's worth to increase your chances of landing a project, even if it's only by 10%. Or to have a client be so impressed by your professionalism that they refer you to their network. Or to build a strong relationship that client becomes a repeat customer who comes back to you again and again. The freelancers who thrive in this virtual first world aren't always the most talented or experienced. They're usually the ones who recognize that presence is part of the product they're selling. They understand that every meeting is an opportunity to reinforce their value, build trust, and differentiate themselves from the competition. So, in conclusion, your virtual presence is basically like a handshake and your first impression all rolled into one. In a world where most professional relationships now exist entirely through screens, the way you show up on camera isn't a nice to have skill. It's an essential skill for the success of your freelance business. The beauty of this is that unlike your technical expertise, which might take more time to develop, you can start improving your virtual presence immediately. Pick one or two of the suggestions from this post and implement them into your next client meeting. See how it goes. Notice the differences, and then refine your approach based on your assessment. You want to build on what works. Because, again, clients aren't just hiring your skills, they're hiring you, the whole package. So when you combine your technical excellence with strong virtual presence, you become the kind of freelancer clients can't wait to work with again. And that's how you build a sustainable, thriving freelance career in the modern world. So before you take your next client call, take a moment. Get in the zone and try to up your virtual presence. Your future self will thank you. Thanks for listening. If you found this useful, please do like and subscribe. And I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.